And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. The newest entry in our continuing series of guilty pleasure movies. And this is another Gen X standard, the sort of film that because it was PG-13, HBO and Cinemax, you could just run it in an endless loop. Take a snapshot of a random day in 1990, 1989, and it's very likely that this movie was airing on one of those channels at some point during the day. And I get to spotlight an actor who, I gotta be honest, I was a little bit jealous of, but who ended up living a very tragic life and met an untimely and early end. The movie is 1988's License to Drive. The actor who is now something of a tragic figure is Corey Haim. So License to Drive came out during a pretty stacked summer movie season with, among others, the original Die Hard, summer 1988. And the poster made me want to see it. I had recently seen Corey in, Lucas. That was the film from 1986 with Kerry Green and Charlie Sheen. And it's not great. Oh, I'm sorry. And a very young Winona Ryder. I almost completely blanked. She's really the first person that I should have mentioned in Lucas. She's fantastic in that film. And then I saw Corey in The Lost Boys, which was just, I thought, phenomenal. Like, to me, it's, you want to flip a coin between The Lost Boys and the original Blade, best vampire movie. It's in the conversation. And Corey was somebody who did good work even before that. He gives a pretty solid performance in an adaptation of a Stephen King short story. The movie was actually called Stephen King's Silver Bullet with Gary Busey, who is solid. It's not a great movie, but as werewolf films go, it's pretty good. It takes a slightly different approach, and Corey's character is very interesting. And he plays Sally Field's son in the movie Murphy's Romance, which ended up winning James Garner his only acting Oscar, in that instance, in a supporting role. So Corey was giving a lot of really solid performances. And there are moments in The Lost Boys where it's just him. He's driving the action. He's the primary character. He's the closest you have to a central character in that film. And he's really, I think he's great. So License to Drive, he makes with his BFF, the other Corey, because they were known as the two Coreys. And then there was the TV show, Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman, although he's still around and was recently with the Goonies when Ke Huy Quan I think he got his handprint on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And Corey Feldman seems to be doing okay, but he's also a bit of an unfortunate individual in Hollywood. He really was put through the ringer. He went through some really horrible shit. And so there is always going to be an element of sadness when someone of my age thinks of the two Coreys, what they went through, how much achievement they had, and how much talent they had, and in a lot of cases was just sort of snuffed out. But License to Drive is the sort of film that a young person who does not yet drive, but is approaching the age in which will be taking a road test and hopefully passing it and getting a license. In the world of this film, and where the movie really scores, aside from the obvious, there's three other actors in the movie that are just fantastic. The first one is Heather Graham. This was an early role for, almost 10 years later, Roller Girl. And Heather Graham, as a character called Mercedes, it's not that she does anything different as far as acting, but there are ways for a filmmaker to frame an actress, and we're supposed to say, like, this is the most beautiful woman we've ever seen, or some variation on that. And they do a really good job in this film, while mostly keeping it above board and tasteful. There's one moment, the slightest hint of potential oral sex, but even that is handled in a humorous way, and it is not off-putting or distracting. She's framed really well, and she hits her marks in a way that makes sense. And it's a good performance by her, and you could see, she was on the rise, and she continued to rise. the masterstroke of casting. Carol Kane playing Corey Haim's mom, and even better, Richard Mazer, just a great actor, plays the father. And Richard Mazer, I think he was the head of I don't know if it was the Screen Actors Guild or he was the actors arm of the MPAA, but I know that he had a major position, and I feel like he spoke one year at the Oscars, but I'm not sure, but it was something pretty important. He wasn't just like, a placeholder type of a guy. He was somebody who was very active within the industry. And Richard Mazer plays the father, and the basic setup is Corey Haim's Les is getting ready to take his road test. And what the movie shows, something that I didn't know at the time, I was about 14, 15 when I first saw it. I think I was 15, is that it isn't just about a road test. It is also, you got to pass a written test. And in my case, going forward a couple of years, the written test to me seemed absurdly easy, that I could have answered the questions when I was, 8 or 9 years old. But in the world of the film, Les he doesn't study at all, and he should, because he knows even less than I would have known when I was a little kid. And he's not bad on the road. And the film takes advantage of, and I should have mentioned him, another great actor who was also on the rise, James Avery, who was probably about a year or so away from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air as Uncle Phil. James Avery plays the proctor, the guy giving our intrepid hero Les the actual driving test, the physical driving test where he's in the car. And if it's possible to steal a movie of this type that isn't entirely serious or at all serious, if it's possible for one actor in 5 minutes to steal a movie, James Avery almost does that, except that Richard Mazer has a couple of unbelievable, hysterical moments in the latter portion of the film. But James Avery, if you didn't know who he was, you would say, this guy, whoever he is unbelievable. This guy is fantastic. So he takes the driving test, Les, with James Avery, giving him, he's a lot meaner in this than he ever is on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But he manages to pass. Unfortunately, he flunks what's supposed to be easy. And then the movie becomes this sort of madcap nocturnal adventure where Corey pretends as Les that he's passed the driving test when he hasn't, and he takes his father's prized car. It was actually the grandfather's car, which was given as a gift, I think, and he takes it out on the town, and all hell breaks loose. Les is trying to get with Heather Graham's character. They're trying not to die. They almost get into multiple car accidents. And while all this is going on, Les's mom, Carol Kane, is very, very pregnant, and she is probably going to need to be transported to the hospital sooner rather than later. And then there's a whole idea of, well, what happens if Les lies about passing the road test? Well, he technically passed the driving test, but he didn't get his license because he failed the written part of the exam. What happens if he lies and then let's just say he fucks the car up? He fucks Grandpa's prized car up while he shouldn't have been out in the first place. Well, what's going to happen? So this is a moment, and there are certain individual beats in comedies where one actor or actress is so good, it elevates the entire film. And Richard Mazer, who has the ability and showed the ability to play comedy and drama with equal skill, because a year before, he's in a John Schlesinger straight up balls out horror film with Martin Sheen and Jimmy Smits, and I think Robert Loggia, Helen Shaver, among others. And Mazer is great in a very serious role as a kind of family friend of Martin Sheen's character. He's terrific. In this film, he is the overwrought dad who is worried. Is he going to pass the road test? And what's going to happen if his bride goes into labor? What are we going to do? Do we have the overnight? All this kind of silly stuff that if you have any memory of somebody in your family, your mom, your spouse, yourself. You know, you have all kinds of things you need to do to prepare. And then when the moment comes, you start forgetting almost everything. So there is a moment, Richard Masur has a moment in the film where Les, the gig is up, car's fucked. He lied about getting a license. And he is going to at least attempt, and I don't know how this would work, but he's trying to apologize to his dad for lying. He was embarrassed, whatever it is. And Richard Masur, he comes across, he's fine. He's not really raising his voice. He's like, Les, do you have any idea what this evening that is passing, do you have any idea what that has done to you, to your future in this home? And then he starts completely losing it when Corey Haim looks scared and he goes, Dad, I think I have an idea. And Masur flips out and screams at the top of his lungs, no, you can't even begin to imagine. And then he goes through a laundry list of, you had a college fund with about 50,000. That's gone. We had a car we were going to buy for you. He goes down this enormous list of all the things that they were setting up for Les, all gone. So just as father and son are nowhere near a rapprochement, and it looks like Les, maybe they're just going to throw him out of the house entirely. You know, we're going to disown him. Fuck this kid. Carol Kane, as the mom, goes into labor. She goes into labor. And, well, Dad starts to go into the front seat to drive, and Mom says, no. And she grabs him and doesn't let him go. She said, I need you in the back seat with me, honey. I need you in the back seat. And he goes, but I have to drive. She says, Les could drive. Masur goes, who? Like he doesn't even know his own son. Like he's already moved on, and I don't have a son. I have a little baby brother, or they had two other kids already. There's a little guy, and then there's an older sister who's a bit of a pain in the ass, but she's actually the most realistic character in the entire film because she's actually paid attention. She passed the road test. She passed the written test. She probably should drive, but somehow Les gets nominated, and, well, whether or not he drives effectively, that will kind of depend on, is he going to be welcomed back into the fold, or is his father just going to excommunicate and completely disown him? Now, License to Drive is very much a product of its time. There is a lot of really inappropriate humor. And I don't think the movie would be made the same way today. You could remake this movie. You just wouldn't do it in the exact same fashion. You would kind of change the targets of the humor. Like there is a couple of jokes about a guy, a drunk driver. It's only maybe marginally slightly funny in the movie. It's sort of one of the weaker segments in the film. You wouldn't do the same thing. You'd have to come up with something different. And that's more of an observation. It's not really a criticism. The film, though, the primary, secondary, and tertiary function of this movie is to make the audience laugh. And aside from the segment and the sequence with the drunk driver, it is a very breezy film. It moves from one big kind of set piece type moment to the next. And through it all, you have the goal of the main character, which is get through this night. He's supposed to have a date with Heather Graham's character, Mercedes. Get through the night. Don't wreck Grandpa's car. And hopefully we can just continue to bluff our way until we actually do get our driver's license. That's his goal. But at the same time, you have his mom about to go into labor, and all of the sort of threads of plot, they kind of come together in a pretty cool way. And this is not a movie that was ever going to win any awards. I don't even know if it turned a profit, but you could see the gears turning, and you could see Haim really was trying. He was not just coasting on the fact that he was, he's a very attractive guy, and with the smile and the hair. He really tried to give a three-dimensional performance, as much as these things really aren't possible. And Corey Feldman, unfortunately, who's a pretty versatile actor in his own right, he doesn't really have anything to do in this movie. And that's unfortunate that he didn't have a better part to play, because we've seen him in movies like, even in the Friday the 13th movie where he appeared, but in the Goonies, he gets to do a lot with the voices and accents and speaking a different language. Like, he can be better than he is allowed to be here. He's almost in a straitjacket because it's Corey Haim's film. Now, the two Coreys went on to star in another movie the following year called Dream a Little Dream. It was with Jason Robards Jr. It's not good. And this is a really random memory. When Dream a Little Dream was coming out, it was released, I want to say, the same weekend as Iron Eagle 2 with Louis Gossett Jr. And there was a movie, I forgot, I don't know if it was Slaves of New York. I don't think it was Pink Cadillac. But I happened to be at a Knicks game. We used to have really good seats, dad, whatever. We were near Celebrity Row. We were, probably 12, 15 rows back, but Celebrity Row was like just to our right. And Louis Gossett Jr., Bernadette Peters, and Jason Robards Jr. were sitting next to one another. Just randomly, they happened to be sitting next to, I guess they all had movies to promote. And I just remember cameraman going over to Bernadette Peters, and it was something like, she was supposed to say, NBA action, it's fantastic. This was like a promotional thing that the NBA did with celebrities at games. It's kind of like, Mike Tyson, after he beats Michael Spinks, I'm going to Disney World, or I'm going to see a knockout new movie, and then whatever the movie was that he was supposedly promoting. But what I remember about Bernadette Peters in this moment, it is Jason Robards sitting right there. It's too bad the Coreys weren't at this game. And here's Louis Gossett Jr. And Bernadette Peters is ready to shoot this little commercial thing that she was doing. It would have been 15 seconds. And all of a sudden, she puts her hands up and goes like this, holds them up and reaches into her purse, and she applies a little bit more makeup. And I tell you, there are moments where you say, okay, this is just an actor. They're acting. Both Jason Robards and Louis Gossett Jr., their laughs look genuine. They were legitimately just laughing their asses off that she stopped them just to put on makeup. She already looked fantastic, if we're being honest. She's obviously a very attractive woman, incredible talent, singer, great, terrific actress. But Dream a Little Dream, terrible movie. I don't really understand. It was a bit of a body switch kind of film, a little bit of a big, like father, like son, vice versa, 18 again. There were so many body switch movies, and this one had elements of that, but I didn't even know what the hell was going on half the time. And unfortunately, the Coreys, their careers dipped. They continued to work. They did a really shitty attempt at an erotic thriller called Blown Away, not the one with Tommy Lee Jones and Jeff Bridges from 1994, but Nicole Eggert, who was, I think that she and Corey were together for a while. But Corey Haim was subjected to, it seems like, years of abuse, and nobody knows for sure. There have been some rumors, but nobody knows for 100% certain who took advantage of him, who took advantage of Corey Feldman. And when Corey Feldman tried to tell his story many years ago on TV, he basically told him to shut up. They thought he was nuts and he was just making everything up. He wasn't. Everything he was saying was true, and it is unfortunate that people thought that he was just full of crap. He wasn't. It all happened. And Corey Haim ended up becoming a very heavy drug addict, and ultimately that's what killed him. He would be 53 if he were still around. I think he was born in December of 71. It's really tragic. He was a significant talent, and he made a lot of really good movies when he was very young. And unfortunately, he never made the comeback that some people were kind of hoping for. He continued to work. He made a lot of movies in the 90s. He did films like Prayer of the Roller Boys, and he did a film, Fast Getaway. He worked with Cynthia Rothrock, the terrific martial artist who made a number of, interesting action movies in the 80s and 90s. But he was never able to make that comeback that so many people were hoping for. And sometimes Hollywood does give fallen stars a bit of a Hollywood ending, but just as often as not, it doesn't happen. But License to Drive is one of those movies that if somebody has seen, let's say they've seen The Lost Boys, are there any other movies with Corey Haim that I might really like? Depending on their age, I might recommend Murphy's Romance. And if they're into horror, I sure as hell will recommend Stephen King's Silver Bullet, which, as I said, is pretty well acted, and the effects work, the creature work is better than it should be, given the fact that the film does not have a significant budget. But License to Drive is if your friend or whoever it might be is looking for something very sort of lighthearted, something comedic, Corey Haim had a very particular kind of charisma and screen presence. A screen presence is something that's very difficult to explain, but not every person has it. Even people who might headline films. Corey Haim had good screen presence. He just looked like he belonged up there. That's why it was so unfortunate that he started making straight to, VHS type films, when this is somebody that was in major movies holding his own with big actors and actresses around him like it was nothing. He had a gift, and it's really sad what happened to him. But License to Drive is a good representation of why he had the career that he did and why he was so successful at such a young age. He didn't luck into it. He was really talented. He had a certain look that you can't teach. That's true. Good genetics. But the way that he was always able to hit his marks and his sense of timing, this is something you could see in Lost Boys. His timing is impeccable. That he hits the lines at the right moment, that he moves to the right spot. These are things that I wouldn't have really thought about when I was younger. But he did everything well on screen. He was pretty resourceful and succeeded in horror and drama and comedy. And License to Drive is not great cinema. It is not great art, but it's a lot of fun. And the supporting actors, especially James Avery and Richard Mazer, just knock it out of the park and elevate this from, it would be like 2.5 stars out of 4. This is a solid 3. And Richard Mazer's meltdown in the final third of the movie, it's in my top 10 favorite character meltdowns. It's almost up there with De Niro Go to Lunch in Copland, or De Niro screaming at Joe Pantoliano during a phone call in Midnight Run. That's how good Richard Mazer's meltdown towards the end of this film is. License to Drive, starring Corey Haim, Corey Feldman, Heather Graham, Richard Mazer, Carol Kane, and a late great James Avery. The newest entry in our continuing series of Guilty Pleasure Movies. This has been episode number 441 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for joining me in the car on this Friday evening here in New York. Once again, if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch up with this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.